On December the 30th, Trinidad and Tobago declared a state of emergency in response to a spike in violent crime. While this measure aims to restore trust and public safety, it does have very profound implications for procurement activities, government spending, and public accountability. So, what would some of the procurement needs during an SOE be? In emergencies like this, procurement must adapt very quickly in order to meet immediate needs. So, key purchases may include security equipment like surveillance systems and communication devices, medical supplies and trauma care equipment for emergency services, temporary housing or food supplies for vulnerable populations, and contracting of additional personnel to support law enforcement. These critical acquisitions often call for expedited processes. However, they still require adherence to procurement principles in order to prevent misuse. So, under an SOE, there may be special purchasing powers that are granted. The government might invoke emergency procurement measures, which allow for accelerated decision making. So, remember, this time is of the essence in an SOE, and also because the first phase of this SOE in Trinidad and Tobago is 15 days long, following which the government must take additional measures and seek parliamentary approval to act more, or to extend the SOE, or to enforce more stricter restrictions such as a curfew, etc. So while all of this is very necessary for urgent needs under the SOE, it does create risks such as reduced transparency, potential cost inflation, or even corruption. So oversight and compliance are really vital in order to mitigate risks under an SOE. In Trinidad and Tobago, we do have the Office of Procurement Regulation. So this is going to be they are going to be really instrumental during this time in order to ensure that emergency purchases comply with all of the laws, and ensuring fairness and accountability are also upheld. So in order to accomplish this, the OPR will monitor and review emergency procurement, ensure documentation justifies the urgency, and provide guidance to agencies on balancing speed with compliance. So their role is so critical to maintaining public trust in the face of increased spending. Public trust in Trinidad and Tobago at this point is basically at zero, coupled with the fact that there is still a lot of unanswered questions as to where billions of dollars have gone, and it remains unaccounted for. This SOE is going to have a lot of questions arising out of it on the public's part. Now, speaking of cost and spending and where is the money going, let's talk for a moment about how this will impact the national budget. So emergency spending will obviously strain an existing budget, particularly when it's unaccounted for, right? Unplanned. The funds needed for security measures, social programs, and emergency services may require a reallocation of not only resources, or it might require supplementary funding in order to carry out the intended purpose of the SOE. So what could happen here is this could delay developmental projects or long-term initiatives outlined in the budget, which was passed, well, not so long ago at this point. It was just at the end of September in last year. So transparency in these reallocations is going to be really key to maintaining fiscal responsibility during this SOE. Now, an SOE is not an excuse for rogue spending. Okay, just because there's an emergency doesn't mean you can just hit pay on the credit card, so to speak. We require really, really strict documentation, transparency, and independent audits are also going to be really essential to ensure that funds were used effectively and as well for their intended purpose. Public reporting on emergency procurement can really help reassure citizens that resources are being managed responsibly. I can tell you that from my own experience, working not during an SOE, but I've had lots of experience where there were emergency purchases and they were a matter of public safety. And even years afterwards, we had to rely on the documentation that was prepared during those times in order to conduct audits, and citizens were filing FOI requests. So how would we have ever been able to connect the dots and paint the picture and tell the story and provide the answers that the public they're entitled to because they are paying their tax dollars, right? How would we have been able to do that without sound rationale as well as a complete fulsome set of documentation to support those purchases? So as I just mentioned, after the SOE, a lot of accountability still needs to happen. And I just gave you an example from my own personal experience on how accountability is can happen well after the fact. So after this SOE ends, there's a number of accountability measures that need to be followed. This is not a suggestion, folks. This needs to happen in order to understand what happened during this whole thing. So we need to conduct comprehensive audits to ensure that compliance was upheld when these purchases were made. We need to evaluate the efficiency of emergency procurement in order to improve future responses. So in other words, we need to have a fulsome lessons learned after all of this. Very, very importantly, we must publicly share findings in order to build and maintain trust. And finally, we need to update policies to address any gaps that were revealed during this state of emergency. So an SOE, it highlights the importance of balancing urgency with accountability in public sector procurement. By maintaining oversight and enforcing compliance, Trinidad and Tobago can not only address immediate challenges, but they can do so without compromising long-term goals. And the OPR's role in all of this, combined with post-SOE accountability measures, it's going to ensure public trust is upheld and value for money is achieved, even in this most extraordinary of circumstances. So this serves as a reminder that robust procurement systems can support national objectives while safeguarding public resources along the way. So let's continue to demand transparency and accountability no matter what the situation is, because your money is valuable and very hard earned.